What's up, YouTube friends? My name is Danny Jones, and welcome to Jones Vibes.
Jones Vibes.
First and foremost, thank you so much for clicking on this video, and if you enjoy it, please go ahead and hit that slime button, like button, and then go ahead and click subscribe as well as hit that notification bell. That'll keep you up to date when I make more content. And this week, I'm talking about Ghostbusters Afterlife. But before I turn on my proton pack, I just gotta say this is a spoiler review. So if you haven't seen this movie, stop right now. And if you have, like me, let's trap some ghosts. So yeah, Ghostbusters Afterlife is a movie that I've seen twice in theaters now. That's right, count it, twice. And I just want to let you know, I didn't expect this at all. I rewatched the original after seeing this movie because honestly, it's been quite a while. I mean, I love that time, like Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, that SNL gang that was running in New York. And the movies that came out of that era were just gold, but for some reason, Ghostbusters, I just haven't watched it probably as much as I should have. So technically, this film is the film that made me a fan of Ghostbusters, if that makes sense. But anyway, my most recent viewing was at Alamo Drafthouse, which was lovely. Actually, now that I think about it, it was just okay. It was like an empty theater, so really there wasn't many people in there. And the people that got tickets, there was this family, they decided to get tickets right next to us in this empty theater. So it's kind of one of those situations where it was like, should we move, or is that rude? But anyway, the movie started and the second viewing was even better than the first. And so that kind of leads me to my initial thoughts, and I just gotta get it out there. Like, I love this movie. I love this movie. I mean, it does feel so much like the original, but it just adds life, or afterlife, to this franchise. And when you compare and contrast the two, I feel like they just nailed it. Unlike another reboot that we don't really talk about. And a huge reason why it feels so much like the original is that Afterlife is directed by Jason Reitman, whose father is Ivan Reitman, the director of the original. I mean, Ghostbusters is one of Ivan's most cherished things in life, so passing the torch to his son is a pretty sweet thing. And funny enough, Jason has actually said that his dad would come to set all the time and just shadow him and lurk behind him. So you can imagine that kind of pressure being behind you. It's like take your child to work day, but the opposite. Take your dad to work day. That'd be pretty sweet, actually. I love you, Dad. But when you're talking about how similar it is to the original, it is really similar. There's a lot of fan service, so I feel like some of the critiques that people are gonna give are just that. It feels way too much like the original, or there's too many moments where it's like, they did that just because. But I feel like the writing and the acting and just the overall love that went into this film, that comes across more than anything. And also, it's not just like a reboot. It's carrying on the legacy of the characters. They're not replacing Ernie Hudson or Dan Aykroyd. Those dudes are actually in this movie, spoiler alert. But anyway, I should really dig into the film. A mom and her two children, Trevor and Phoebe, are forced out of their apartment due to not paying rent.
You'll get your rent when you fix this damn door!
And they're forced to move to Oklahoma, where Callie's father, the mom, he had an old house that was left to her. But this town that they moved to is having a ton of earthquakes, a lot of seismic activity. And a lot of it is coming from this lone mountain outside of the town. But we're introduced to these main characters, and first of all, I just want to highlight McKenna Grace. She plays Phoebe, and she's this misunderstood little genius. And something I didn't expect is she's actually really funny too. She has all these dad jokes just right in her arsenal, which made me jealous. That strikes my heart. Some of them had me busting up, like Ghostbusters. But she links up with this friend at summer school, and his name is Podcast. And I didn't expect to love this character nearly as much as I did. I mean, just like everything else in this movie, he was just amazing. So funny. He has a supernatural podcast that apparently finds its voice in episode 46, so be looking out for that. Phoebe's brother, Trevor, is played by Finn Wolfhard, and it's funny to see him in another sci-fi adventure, but I guess stranger things have happened. That one was better. But he's just a very typical teenager. He's coming from the city, so obviously he's I don't want to move to this small town. But he quickly meets this love interest working at this diner that he gets a job at. Her name's Lucky. She's played by Celeste O'Connor. And he's also a really skilled mechanic. You kind of see bits and pieces of that, no pun intended. And he actually restores Ecto-1, which is the original vehicle from the Ghostbusters films. He finds it in Egon's shed, and there's this really fun scene where he's driving through the field and having a blast. But anyway, the kid's mom, like I was saying, her name is Callie. She's played by Carrie Coon. And I actually can't really even remember seeing this actress before. I haven't even looked at her IMDb, but it's interesting starting this movie because you have all these child actors, and then you have a main, the daughter of Egon Spengler, but she is kind of an unknown. So then that brings you to Paul Rudd, and he's kind of He's the big star in this. Ladies and gentlemen, 2021's People Magazine Sexiest Man Alive, which I was runner-up this year. I hurt my knee, so then I disqualified me. But back to Paul Rudd. I mean, this is a guy, he's been around forever. Like, from Clueless to 40-Year-Old Virgin to Anchorman to Ant-Man. And don't get me wrong, like, I love Paul Rudd. I really do. And Ant-Man is awesome. He's a cool superhero. But this was the role for me. Like, he held this down. He embodies Ghostbusters. He brought that feel into this movie for me. And he's not on screen like a ton. I mean, he shows up fairly often, but he doesn't have the most screen time in the world. But when he is on, man, it was just so fun to watch. Like, he's this science teacher. He teaches Phoebe's summer school class. And he actually just moved to this town because of all the seismic activity. Like, he loves science, which is perfect for Phoebe. Her real dad, like, never got along with her or even understood her. So it's great that this, like, kind of father figure steps into her life and identifies so much with her. Like, him and Callie are on a date, and he's like, no, Phoebe is awesome. Like, she's amazing. She's a great kid. And yeah, she's in his class, so that's kind of how they get introduced, and they start talking about the earthquakes that are going on, and eventually they kind of team up because Phoebe is interested in her grandfather, obviously, and they're living in his house. So she goes looking, and she finds his PKE meter that they used in the originals that Egon's always walking around like trying to find the ghost with. And she finds one of these things, and so it leads her down to her grandfather's, what would you call it, like laboratory, his workspace, and he has all these crazy things, and there's a lot of references to the original in there, but she ends up fixing a proton pack. And it's really sweet. Her grandfather is a ghost now, and he's like embodied this light, this like lamp. And so he's in there helping, and she's just cool with it. And she fully understands kind of what's going on. But yeah, he helps her fix this proton pack. And so her and Podcast take this thing out. And this is kind of when the movie really starts rolling. Like, it moves quickly from this point on. Her and Podcast go out and shoot it. And they're actually out in this like abandoned metal warehouse area. And this is where it feels a lot like the original. Like, when they go on the hunt and they first meet Slimer, I think that's his name, Slimer. So yeah, they go through this warehouse and they end up meeting Muncher, which is like this big blue ghost. And this whole scene was super fun. Her and Podcast are kind of playing off each other, trying to catch this ghost, and they keep failing. And so he escapes and he flies off through the town. And so this is when they meet up with her brother, who's now fixed the car. And we have like this phenomenal car chase through the town. And Phoebe utilizes the car seat and like pops out of the car. And the little quippy one-liners, as well as the music and just this intense action that somehow Jason Reitman directed. Like, it's beautiful. This is when I really got hooked. And the kids end up catching Muncher, but they get arrested and they go to jail. But after this is where we get into like the Gozer stuff. Like, if you remember from the original, there's Gozer, and then Sigourney Weaver was, I think she was the keymaster, and Rick Moranis was the gatekeeper. Gosh, I miss Rick Moranis. I half expected him to show up in this. I hope he didn't shrink himself. But yeah, the kids find this temple that's in that mountain outside of town. And they go in there, and like there's this pit of like lost souls. And then there's this guy named Ivo Shandor, who's just randomly played by J.K. Simmons. But he's like dead, but he dedicated his life to bringing back Gozer, I guess. And she comes back every like 35 years, 40 years, I don't know, I wasn't paying that close attention the 2 times that I saw it. But yeah, so since the original, you know, like they locked her up and they defeated her, like now she's back. And so it wasn't a new threat, it was a familiar threat, which is something that I enjoyed a lot, but maybe other people didn't like it, I don't know. But it turns out that Phoebe was right. Egon spent his life like constructing this huge trap in this city to stop Gozer because he knew. And so what you find out from Dan Aykroyd, or I guess I should be calling them by their names, Ray Stantz, is that Egon and the Ghostbusters, they had kind of a huge falling out because Egon kept saying that the world is going to end and like we have to do this and that, and nobody believed him. And so he left and he went to this small town and he built all this basically to save the world, like save the world from the apocalypse, like the coming of Gozer. And so what are these kids to do but form a plan to save the world just like Egon? And they do, and it's pretty tight. In the middle of this, you have Callie, the mom. She stumbles across his laboratory or his little area underneath the shed as well. And she finds, this was so sweet. She finds all these pictures of her down there. Like, she always thought that her dad did not care about her at all. She thought that he just wanted to get rid of her and never contacted her. But turns out, like, he left to, like, save her. And he was keeping track of her whole life. Like, it's super emotional. This is when the tears for me kind of started, like, coming in. I was like, whoa, I didn't expect this to be so emotional. I have allergies, it's cool. But she ends up getting attacked by either the gatekeeper or the keymaster. I'm sorry, I can't remember. But she gets attacked by one and taken over and possessed. Just like Sigourney Weaver. Like, it's very similar. She has on like this gold dress. All of a sudden she looks like almost like a Cleopatra or something. And then on the other side, we have my favorite scene where Paul Rudd goes to Walmart, and it starts with just like panning through Walmart, and he's walking just so douchey. Just like, what's up? He's like checking out the ice cream like Jamocha. This is what I was talking about with Paul Rudd's performance. Like, it just kills me. But then since the ghosts are kind of like creeping into the town, you have the marshmallow bags that start opening up, getting one of these little guys, and they come out and they're super adorable, but then all of a sudden they bite his finger, and then it shows them in like a blender. They're roasting each other. They're making like s'mores out of each other, which is hilarious. So all this was super fun. But then this beast attacks him, and I gotta say, the practical effects on this keymaker, gatekeeper thing were fantastic. You don't see that anymore. Everything's CGI now. And so that was something about it that I loved, because going from that to watching the original and seeing like the same exact practical effect, it's just so cool. But long story short, it ends up like owning him, and he gets possessed as well. So they're the two, the gatekeeper and the keymaster, ready to bring back Gozer. And I'll tell you, when she comes back, it is wild. But seriously, I was like, is that Olivia Wilde? I think that's Olivia Wilde, which was so random. And she looks a lot like the Gozer from the original, who was also played by Olivia Wilde. No, I'm just kidding. And just as Gozer enters the picture, Phoebe comes in, and she has these hilarious little dad jokes. One of them's like, two whales are talking in a bar, and one of them's like, "Wah!" And the other one's like, go home, you're drunk. But they end up setting the mom free, like they use the trap and get the ghost. And they hightail it to the property where the house is. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Lucky, Celeste O'Connor, like she's a part of this whole plan too. She's like an integral piece in this group. So it's like, it's the four of them. It's Phoebe, Podcast, Trevor, and Lucky. And like, they're all wearing the suits, and they all have the packs, and I don't know, the nostalgia was pretty fun. But yeah, anyway, yeah, they hightail it to the property, and they have this plan, and it goes pretty well. Like, they almost get Gozer, but Trevor's proton pack ends up having a bunch of the marshmallow guys on it, so it's like all messed up. So that doesn't work. So just when you think all hope is lost, who steps in? And I gotta admit, I got a little emotional here, but not as emotional as this next scene, because like the Ghostbusters, the original Ghostbusters, they're back, and Ray Stantz starts it out in one of those like Dan Aykroyd monologues that you remember watching on SNL when you were little. And then Bill Murray has a couple kind of cheesy, funny lines, and they end up fighting Gozer, but they actually get their butt kicked too. So then it's up to Phoebe, and she steps up. And this is when like I got overly emotional. She steps up with her proton pack, and she fires it at Gozer. And it reminded me so much, honestly, of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, when Voldemort and Harry's wands are connecting, and it's like, you must get back to the portkey! Take my body back. Take my body back to my father. Damn it, Cedric. But yeah, anyway, it reminded me a lot of that. Like, Gozer is connecting with like electricity, and she has her proton pack, and so they're connected, and it's this crazy epic thing. And then all of a sudden the music kind of drops, and it pans up. And you see that Egon is just holding Phoebe's hand and helping her. And she looks up at her grandfather for the first time. Like, man. Still gets me. Like, this was just so clever and so well done. And they end up defeating Gozer. Like, the mom steps on the pedal and they suck her into one of the traps. And so, like, boom, yeah, the day is won. And then you get all these emotional scenes where, like, Trevor gets to meet his grandfather. And then Callie gets to meet her father. Like, it's overly emotional. You also get the Ghostbusters that are seeing their best friend that they haven't seen forever, but he's dead. And the saddest part about all this, like, I should have kept up with this news, but I didn't know. I found this out after the film. But Harold Ramis, like, the guy who played Egon, he passed away. I think it was in 2014. Like, he passed away. So, you know, they made his character in this. And it's all CGI, and he never says a word, which I was kind of curious about. I was like, he's not talking. You'd think if it was just like a ghost. But yeah, when I put those pieces together too, it's just beautiful. And at the end, when it pans up, it says, for Harold. And you just don't expect that. I just didn't expect that out of Ghostbusters Afterlife. This fall has been filled with so many good movies. It's been so much fun, but somehow this movie like won the season for me. It won the year for me so far. This movie really just made me a Ghostbusters fan. Like, I want posters, I want merchandise, I want my own proton pack. And nobody knew in the theater that there was 2 post-credit scenes. Luckily, my wife and I looked it up on our phones. But yeah, there's 2 post-credit scenes. So you might get spoiled here if you didn't watch both of these. The first one is just Sigourney Weaver, because the credits say, and Sigourney Weaver, and you're like, I didn't see her. But it goes to her and Venkman, and he's doing what he did in the original, like guessing the shapes of the cards, and she's zapping him. And it's just this cute little scene. But it was so awesome to see Sigourney Weaver. But then the last one is the one that was really interesting. It was kind of strange. So we have Janine, what was her name? Janine Melnitz. And her and Egon kind of had a relationship when they were younger. And she's going to visit Winston, who is like kind of like a millionaire at this point. But they have a little conversation. He says some inspirational stuff. And then he actually goes back to, I think it's the firehouse, the original firehouse. And he pulls in the car and you're like, okay, here we are. Like, what are they doing? And then it shows a blinking light where they used to keep the energy from all the ghosts, or where they used to lock them all up. And then it ends. And so we're talking sequels, I guess. And I'm in, 100%. But anyway, I want to hear what you thought about it. Am I just overly hyped on this per usual? Or is it just that good? I mean, I've heard some people say it was awesome. I've actually heard a little bit of negativity and criticism as well. So I would just love to know your opinion. And also, if you did like this video, hit that like button for me. That would mean the world. And if you're not already subscribed, I would love to have you back to watch more of these breakdowns. But that's about all the ghost busting that I have for you today. So I hope you all are safe, happy, and healthy, and I will see you next time.